welcome to another episode of this great podcast with Innocent, Tomiwa, and myself. Together we make up TIC-Talk. And today we'll be talking about something that we hinted on a while back, which is the male ego. I remember that in a previous episode when we were talking, I talked about how the ego that we have sometimes drives us to achieve things and the fact that it's a double-edged sword. So now we've decided to talk about it proper because like we promised on that episode. So today we're talking about the male ego and everything surrounding it, right? Of course, if you've been on social media, you would have seen a bunch of tweets over time and even in general life where people talk about the fragile male ego and what it is and how people always allude to that. So today we're going to be discussing that. Welcome to my guests. Sorry, my co-host. Tomiwa is a co-host. Innocent is a guest because I don't like that guy. But
No,
anyway,
and just like guest, I'll behave like guest.
all right. So my co-host. So of course the first question is, what is the male ego, and is it a myth? Is it real? What is it? Is it a blanket term that applies to like all guys? Do we all have that male ego? And I mean, of course, what's the reason why this thing even exists in the first place? And is it different from the female ego? Why is there something called the male ego, especially the fragile male ego? So I'll start with Innocent. Um, yeah, talk to us.
So, as a guest on today's show, I would like to simply state that I do not have the academic pedigree to fully discuss ego, as I do not have a degree in psychology or any form of clinical psychology or human psychology or psychiatry, as the case may be, because it's sometimes, but my opinion, sometimes ego is all about madness. That said, I would like to imagine that the idea of a male ego
Yeah.
is a two-sided sword. It's sometimes presents itself as a mechanism of defense, where you put it on as a shield that this is what I am, who I'm supposed to be, and you use it to guard yourself against some particular situations, downfalls, or feelings, as the case may be. Not necessarily
Yeah.
the same type of feeling. It may not be love or something, but be other forms of feeling you're guarding yourself against. But you wear it as a shield. On the other end, it is also a spear which people misbehave in public. Sometimes it's a spear which people act, sometimes misbehaving, sometimes not misbehaving, but it defines people's behavior, and it comes from a place of I am this, and hence I have to be this, and hence I have to do this. So you have to either take it or leave it, kind of a thing. I think ego in general is not entirely a bad thing. It all falls into the application and the way you use it, the way you behave when you're acting with such ego. Ego could be healthy. It could help you in actually pushing yourself towards achieving things, and in such situation, it's fair. But when your ego becomes a tool or an excuse for you to cross boundaries, then you are into problem. So male ego sometimes manifests itself as tools for sexism, actually, and that is when it becomes very much problematic. Thank you very much, dear hosts.
All right. Tomiwa, what's your perspective?
So just like Innocent said, I mean, the male ego is it's a real thing, right? It's tied. It's your self-esteem, your physiological makeup as a man, is inextricably tied to the ego that you are supposed to have as a man as well, right? Now, unfortunately, I guess it can be both a good thing and a bad thing, right? In the sense that the ego almost demands that you are strong. Like I said on the last call that triggered this conversation, you are the provider, you are the protector guy, you are the one who is supposed to be strong in the face of all odds, right? You're supposed to not show vulnerability. You're supposed to be rock solid in the face of the world falling apart around you. But on the flip side, everyone knows that it's unrealistic to expect anyone to be rock solid every time, all the time, regardless of circumstance. But unfortunately, that's the box that we kind of, I guess, put ourselves in, or I don't know if we're doing it ourselves, or I would say it's the social construct of being a man and being manly that has boxed us into that role. And it's almost impossible to shake out of it. You can find a more healthier way to express it, but even the healthiest way to express it will still be caught up in the parochial definition of that, be a man, be strong, be
Yeah.
unfazed by everything. And I guess that is where, the bad sides of this thing comes forth. And I think the biggest, or rather the most jarring aspect of the male ego for me is that it's not enough for you to have your ego and to be strong and to not show vulnerability. It actually extends past you. So everybody, especially members of the opposite gender, women, then expect a man to be a certain way, which usually just toes the line of, the male ego. They expect you to be strong, they expect you to be invulnerable. And immediately you show or you act in any way that is, or rather that falls short of these expectations, boom. Oh, you're doing like you're acting like a woman, you're not acting like a man, right? And I remember I stumbled on a Reddit thread one day where this actually was in the West. It didn't happen in Nigeria. But apparently, this boyfriend and girlfriend, or husband and wife, I'm not sure. The partner, the female partner, stumbled into the male partner crying, right? So apparently he had lost his job and he was trying to make things work, trying to hide it, trying to be the male, I have everything under control. And then one day he just broke down. He just couldn't take it anymore. He was just bawling. He feels lost. He feels rudderless, directionless because his entire sense of self worth was tied into, his job and what he was doing. And this guy really bawled and, let everything all out to his girlfriend or his wife or his partner, as the case may be. And it was the partner who came to Reddit and was like, I'm sorry, this thing that he did, I'm sure that he did it because he needed it. But me, I'm not attracted to him again. I don't want to do it again because that's not what I expect from a man.
Hmm.
Right? So that thing shocked me. It's like that thing shook me to my core because it's all well and good for us to say, oh, men should be more vulnerable, men should talk more, men should. But the
Yeah.
same, at least a large portion of the same audience who would expect that okay, they would be more accommodating if we managed our ego more healthily, would actually be turned off if we did. So it's a catch 22. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah. That's an
I don't know,
interesting
man.
perspective. That's an interesting perspective.
Well,
Uh,
but isn't ego also somewhat flimsy, like somewhat light? In the sense, I mean, lyrics, a song lyric just going through my head, and if I reverse that lyrics in my head, ego is something that if you add one more G to, it becomes waffle that you can have in the morning. Basically, that's what it becomes. The line is from Childish Gambino. You took the G out of your waffle, all you've got left is your
is your ego?
took the G off your waffle, all you've got left is your ego. So basically, if you just add one more G to an ego, it just becomes waffle.
And you're right,
Well,
actually. I agree with you. And if anything, that's why it is ego. I think primarily because it is a social construct that is not backed by anything other than the genitalia that you are born with,
Hmm.
right? Now, in some cases, you grow to become a man that, is resilient and is strong and, knows how to be unfazed in the face of trouble. But for the most part, it's all just a facade. You're just, putting up a wall that looks like brick was actually made of paper.
Mm,
And when shit hits the fan, you can
mm,
act like you have shit under control and you can be absolutely crumbling. And Lord knows if you don't find a channel to, to let out whatever it is that you're building up inside, it will eat you up, it will destroy you, it will force you or make you do things that you ought not to do. So yes,
Yeah.
I'm not there's no version of this conversation that will say there is or it is this male ego as we speak of it. It is a completely positive thing. I would go as far as saying that it does have positive effects, right? Not rather, let me say positive symptoms because it is a disease in and of itself, right? But that
Yeah.
doesn't make it a good thing.
Mm. That's interesting. If you see my screen, you see that I've changed my sub. Of course, Innocent has changed his own to guest. I've changed my own to critical theorist. And that's because
before
I've
you called me a
always
guest, I don't understand.
okay, fine. So that's because I've always really believed that the concept of the ego, and I mean a lot of things are basically driven by social, and structural things, right? I believe that where we are socialized into a
Mhm.
lot of these things. I think the only argument, or the strongest argument I have, or that can be made against this idea, is that if you go to different places, different cultures, regardless of cultural context, right, you probably find that famed male ego manifesting somewhere. So how is it that that idea has been able to travel so far and wide, and those same habits and behaviors are attributed? I mean, someone in Mexico is probably looking at some guy acting out and saying this is the male ego, the fragile male ego, or something in action. Someone in Zimbabwe is doing the same. Somewhere in Japan is doing the same. But that also brings me to the next question about cultural context, which is that okay, both of you have lived inside and outside Nigeria. You've seen how the word male ego, the phrase male ego has been used. So now I want to ask, in those different places that you've been and in your encounters everywhere, how has it differed from place to place? This whole concept of male ego. Has it been consistently pretty much the same across board? Or have you seen it manifest differently, in different places? Innocent.
Yes and no. And that's a cop out answer, but that's the truth. You find, I mean, and this is going to sound like a deja vu because I did say similar things when we're talking about masculinity. You find some
Yeah.
common threads across board, right? You find some common threads. Some act like this and act like that. But you also find some common threads that are more human than gender based, which is usually the idea of whatever it is that leads to your ego, whatever it is that trigger the ego. That some of the common threads you find with some people is the idea of never back down, which I don't understand because it means you don't open yourself to possibilities, knowledges, and just possibilities basically. Um, fuck up, miserable. Um, so you find that happening in a lot of spaces, but where the difference often lies are the triggers, are the triggers of the ego, or the should I say the core components of the things that form the person's uh, ego self. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like the entity of the person's ego, the composition of it might be different. And for example, and not to dog waste in any sense. For example, a a a white man who believes he's of the Aryan race, for example, has a particular set of composition in his approach to ego, right? Because of a certain sense of superiority, not just to the other gender, but to every race in the world. Because of, and I hope you understand what I mean by a white man of the Aryan race. I'm trying not to use a specific word. Um, But you find that there are these manifestations of it that is less so because they are a man, but because they believe in the superiority of their race, right? In that sense, and even if it's not one of those people who strongly believe in all of these ideas of race superiority or all of these ideas, annoying fucking shits, if I'm being very fucking honest. But you also find that people who are also very much say nationalistic, for example, it also becomes a component of their ego. And not just that, you find people who believe in things like exceptionalism, especially if you're in a country where exceptionalism have been drilled into your skull since you were a kid, right? So you find yourself acting not just in a sense of, so if you have the particular ego, if it's either the good or the bad end of the spectrum, you find it's being composed of things about exceptionalism also, because that is part of your identity. So there are cultural differences, there are individual differences, and these individual differences are molded based on the culture you grew up on, but the basic framework seems to be the same for me.
The same. Tomo, what do you think?
I have a far shorter answer, and it's very closely mimics your apes innocent answer, which is yes and no. Yes, the same types of expectations are placed on men, I guess, at least from my perspective, as I can say. But it does feel like there's a lot more sensitivity to the negative aspects, right? So if you're mansplaining, for example, someone will quickly call you out. If you slip up, if you make a sexist joke or, you are being touchy-feely and whatnot, someone will call you out more readily than would happen in Nigeria. And I think that's an amazing thing because, again, we learn these things, and I do like, in a sense, parallel, pulling it, at least pulling in the exceptionalism of the average, at least the exceptionalism. I don't know what to call it. Is it okay, it's an ideology. So the exceptionalism ideology of the average American, right?
Yeah.
And it's essentially the same thing, just more hardcore, where it's beat into your brain that you are stronger, you are better, you are faster, you are more intelligent, with no backing again other than the genitalia that you're born with. And we need to push back on a lot of these things, right? Because they are fundamentally not true, right? There's some things that are true, yes, physically for the most part, we have a lot more, tensile strength slash endurance than the average woman, right? That's biology. There's no disputing that. But for the most part, especially with metrics that have nothing to do with, physical strength, a lot of it is just waffle. And if you grow up believing waffle and you actively go on every day acting on that waffle, you will be a very serious problem to everyone around you. So I think the summary is yes, there's a lot more. There are the same sets, or at least there's the same kind of expectations, there's the same kind of across different genders, across different cultures, across different backgrounds. The male tends to have that fundamental, just that ego. It seems to be grounded in the same core tenets, but there seems to be a lot more sensitivity to the negative aspects. And for the most part, that's a good thing. It's not always a good thing, to be honest, but for the most part, it's a good thing. And yeah, that's what I see every day at least.
Okay. Um, these are all very interesting perspectives, to be honest, because like I mentioned earlier, I and it's interesting that both of you mentioned socialization basically, and just to go deeper on that or go further on that, we all grew up with, I don't know. Of course, I believe that this thing is maybe a socially constructed thing. It's not a social construct per se, but it's socially constructed, right? I don't know if I'm making sense in that regard, but yeah, the idea is that maybe it doesn't. You're not born with a male ego, right? But you are socialized into it. So you're growing up. There's this entitlement, for instance, and I mean, I experienced that. I'm sure that we experienced that as well. As you're growing up, you are dealing with an entitlement that is placed on your head, where you start to feel entitled. You start to feel a certain. And these are things that you kind of tend to you have to unlearn over time, because there's just so much that is just placed on your head. The way that the we always talk about the boy child and how the boy child is raised, and I think even in society, outside of like the people actually raising you, but you are experiencing society every day. You're seeing how a guy is treated separate from like the way a girl is treated, and the way that they place that entitlement in you, and you start to feel entitled to so many things just because you're a guy, just because
It's
you
a
have,
village, yeah.
yeah, everywhere you go, even like even outside of your own natural influence, like the people who are influencing you directly, your family and all of that, and your school and all that. You go into the market, you see the way the boys are regarded. You go into the streets, you go everywhere. There's a way they just koto to that entitlement. I think it everything really stems from that entitlement that is placed in boys, where you just feel entitled to this, and that's where also things like rape culture come in, because there's also that thing where you are made to feel like you are entitled to a woman's body or things like that. You're entitled to being served. You are not supposed to be washing or doing the dishes or doing this domestic work, all that, because you're a man. And it kind of builds up that male ego, such that by the time you are older, it's hard to unlearn. And then when you start to see a more progressive society where these things are questioned and people are supposed to unlearn, then you start to push back on it, because it challenges everything that you've ever known and everything you grew up being told. You are a man, this is what you are entitled to. You are supposed to talk. You're supposed to talk in these places. Girls are not supposed to talk here. Things like that, all those damaging things. Which also brings me to the question of socialization, right? And I want to know your views. Do you think that, first of all, um, there is something embedded in a boy when the boy is born, that is the male ego, and that society merely or socialization merely builds on that? Or is it purely, do you think it's purely a socialization issue, where if boys were raised differently, they wouldn't have this male ego? Is it innate or is it learned? And also, speaking from your experiences as well growing up, how you were socialized, and the things you've had to unlearn as well. Innocent.
Why always me?
Yeah, let me start. Let me
Why
start.
always me?
Let me
Why?
start.
Why
I
always
think
me? Tomba, go ahead.
uh, I think it's largely, how they say nature versus nurture. So I think it's largely nurture, right?
Yeah.
So there's expectations on men right from when they are, in fact, before they are born, right? We don't need to talk too far, right? We can look at. I'm a huge fan of the man, but I mean Tony Elumelu and his family. I don't think I need to go into more details for you guys to understand. And if anyone is listening who doesn't understand, just Google Tony Elumelu's family. You should understand. So there's huge expectations placed on males before they're even conceived, right? Right?
Yeah.
Then you are born and then you are socialized. So you come into a family, there's three, four, five, six girls ahead of you, right? And then in front of them, while they're there, every day, they're ramming into you now, you are my heir. You are inheriting all this. You are taking my name forward. You are this, you are that. You will like it will bake a social construct of what the world should be to you. The world should bow to you. The world should kneel at your feet, right? Everybody be down. You are a man and you are here, right? And of course, I mean, it goes without saying that if you are raised in that kind of dynamic, you, again, going back to Innocent's exceptionalism ideology, and the point that he made about it is that these things are rammed into your head every day. your entire worldview will be warped, will be shaped by that ideology, which is you are
Yeah.
supposed to be. Because why? Nobody bothers telling you why, other than because you are a man. Nobody wants to define what being a man really is, other than the fact that you being a man means that this is what is expected of you, right? And before I touch the counterpoint to it that just occurred to me, there's a small nature part to it. And the nature part to it is just testosterone, right? Testosterone is a hormone that both male and females have, but males have it in, in really, really high quantities. And it unfortunately, drives a lot of, the competitiveness and the assertiveness and the the need to dominate physically that we we tend to have. Then I am also a huge fan of the theory of genetic markers being imprinted on us over generations. Right? So there are many things that you do today that or that you are today instinctively, and you only are like that or act like that because generations of your ancestors had to respond to certain stimuli a certain way. And one of my favorite examples of this, genetic marker theory is the theory that surrounds the call of the void. I don't know if you've heard or read about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you've
Yeah.
ever been in a
L'appel
situation
du
where
vide.
you're in a scary place, so you're on a boat and you're staring into the sea, or you are on a very high, I don't know, high pedestal or something, and you look down, and then you suddenly have that flash of either yourself, someone else, falling to their deaths or something, or falling into the river and never being seen again. Apparently, it's an evolutionary warning traits that we've developed over time, where essentially your brain creates a nightmare scenario. Whenever you're in a dangerous situation, your brain creates a nightmare scenario just to essentially head you off doing anything stupid. So if you're somewhere high, it shows you yourself or someone else falling. So you'll be like, yeah, I should watch my step to make sure I don't fall.
Yeah.
And
See
theory is
this
that
louder.
the theory is that it's a genetic marker essentially that we have evolved to have over time, right? So I feel like also the protector, hunter, provider instincts that we tend to have, right, is is a lot nature. A lot of it is nature as much as it is nurture. And I will end this by just quoting. I said I was going to talk about a counterpoint. I can't even remember it. But anyways, there are a bunch of videos that go viral on Twitter, like once every year, once every couple of years, where someone with a microphone goes around asking women and men, asking them that if, you know, they were asked to choose, if someone was to die between them and their partner, right? And they had the power to choose which one of them would die, who would they choose? The women
Yeah.
overwhelmingly picked their husbands or their male partners, while the men overwhelmingly, completely pick themselves. Every time they would say, "Yeah, I'll die. I want my wife needs to live. My wife needs to live longer. She can take care of the kids. She can take care of the family." They would always pick themselves, and this thing cuts across cultures. So I feel like that's one of the things that, yeah, that is definitely nature, where it's a genetic marker that we have evolved over time to have, where we just instinctively want to protect and cover and provide for. Counterpoint may come back to my head later, but for now, I'll leave it with innocent.
Come back in Jesus' name.
That makes a lot of sense actually. Now we've talked about the positives, the fact that it's like a double-edged sword. There are positives to the male ego as it is perceived, and there are negatives as well. Now, innocent, this question is for you. How do we, or what is your advice, your view for how the ego can be permanently positive, and like basically to minimize the negatives and maximize the positives and just to be able to keep a healthy ego? What are the tips? What do you think men should do to be able to maintain a healthy ego? and minimize the negatives of that ego? Because I don't think that we
Read.
can get rid of the ego completely. It always manifests.
Read. All you just need to do is read.
Read who?
Clinton, all you need to do is read. And not just pigeonhole yourself into one type of book. Acquire knowledge. I don't know. There are very few things knowledge can solve. Acquire knowledge as far and wide. Read history, read fiction, read all of these things. And then when you're done reading all of that, step the fuck outside and go be human. Go engage with society, engage with people, go meet people, actually be physically present and observe. Then also ask yourself questions and understand the possible difficulty and harm your behavior might cause or is causing. All of these things, honestly, and it's once again, I'm not saying don't have any ego, because like I said, it could be a shield to protect yourself sometimes. But if you
Yeah.
acquire knowledge, if you leave yourself open to knowledge and not just restrict yourself to one type of knowledge, then you have a good chance of coming out better at the other side.
Because yeah,
I
this
definitely
this
don't have any counterpoint to that yet.
yeah. I think that I mean, at the end of the day, what we're doing here is we're trying to help men be the best version or versions of themselves. So, innocence says read a lot, and apply it in real life and all. But don't lose the ego completely because it helps you. What does Tomiwa say? What's the advice? How do the next generation of men that are coming up who are still in that state where they are the all the indoctrination that they went through growing up and all the socialization has kind of messed with them, and they just find themselves instinctively reacting a certain way, mostly negative, to things related to the ego, and having that fragile ego that they talk about, where like the fragility just affects everything, your relationships, and it starts to alienate people also because we're in a society that is increasingly progressive, and we're trying to unlearn a lot of things. Now, from your perspective, how does someone, a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old coming up, entering adulthood, how does that person navigate the problems created by that male ego that has been nurtured by society, especially negatively? How does that person enter adulthood and correct and even maximize the positives of that and minimize the negatives?
I mean, I think there's a huge responsibility on older men, you know, not just ourselves, but boomers and Gen X's and the likes. I don't even know which is which. To talk about these things. I remember I saw there was this funny video, right? This streamer guy, Kai Senat, he had Kevin Hart on the stream, and they played a video where he was trying to, I don't know, toast what's her name, this South African girl, this singer Tyler,
Tyler.
and then
Tyler,
yeah,
yeah.
he kind of messed it up, right?
Yeah, she
Yeah,
friend
he
him.
said something I can't remember what he said, but Kevin Hart kept trolling him about it, right? And then kept trolling about his approach, and someone then quoted him. And I was like, "It's goofy, yes, but he won't forget because he kind of set the girl up. He put the girl in front of his stream and then tried to ask her how out there, essentially like pressuring her, so thinking that she'll say yes because there's a million people on the stream, and that's unhealthy, and that's him essentially feeding his ego, wanting to make sure that I landed Tyler on the stream in front of everyone, and Kevin trolling him like that. Hopefully, it'll have that effect, but essentially was a version of Kevin just telling that that wasn't right. You shouldn't have been doing that, man. There's
Yeah.
better ways to do these things. And it then fits into my point, which is we need to talk a lot more about these things, especially the unhealthy parts. We need to acknowledge the mistakes that we've made because we didn't get here today
Yeah.
because we had like a spanking clean resume. We need to acknowledge the mistakes and the lessons that we've learned. And we need to listen we need to listen, right? But that's on our side of things. Now, for the 20-year-old, it will never, ever, ever, and I say this across board, it will never, ever, ever be a justifiable excuse that you did something because instinct or because emotion or because you were just driven to, you didn't know what was happening, you weren't aware. No. If anything, I will lean into the Beligo and say that's one of the key things that you're supposed to have, which is control or strength or the ability to like hold back, even when you feel things strongly, right? So I think that, like Innocent Day said, read, learn, get out, and then find positive, what's it called? Male role
Role
model.
models.
Please don't listen to Andrew Tate. Please. Andrew Tate is a scammer grifter that is just repeating, I don't know, talking points that he thinks will stir controversy just for attention or because he wants to grow his channel or because he wants to make money off the social media algorithms. No, there are better
Yeah.
people
But
to
what
listen to.
sentence? It is a grifter. It's full. It's complete sentence enough on its own. It's a grifter. That's just it.
That's
Yeah.
it. So please, just there are better people to listen to. I'm not going to call names. I'm not saying go and look for pastors and go and sit down and be listening to what they're saying because many
No,
of them too,
a lot of
they are
pastors are
grifters.
grifters
So
also.
Yeah.
right, but please look for real male role models that aren't only saying these things, but you can see that they're showing evidence in their lives, right? Of
Is
the
it my
way these people talk.
imagination, or is Tomoa forming a new word called model?
It's is
From
is is is
male and
killing
role
me,
model.
man. The Yoruba in
Male
me
and
is like male
model,
role model. It's killing me. Male
Okay,
role model.
model
Over
model.
Kwame
Which
Ejo.
male role model?
Ah, over Kwame, man. Anyways, please, Ejo, move along,
Yeah.
boy. Ejo, please. Not everyone who wears a suit, not everyone who speaks with an accent, not everyone who
Mm.
talks the good talk is genuine. And you will make mistakes. There's always allowance for making mistakes, but listen, learn, act on the things you hear, and learn your own lessons as well. That's it.
Mm. Fantastic. Just one last word from Innocent before we close the show. One last word from
One last word
Innocent,
for
and
me.
then yeah. Mm.
Hey, I would. My last word would be, and I think this is very important. It would be quoting. Well, it's actually not originally a Neil deGrasse Tyson quote. He was quoting someone, but I can't remember who he was quoting. So because it was Neil deGrasse Tyson saying this, I'm quoting Neil deGrasse Tyson quoting someone. Which is, if you ever find yourself to be the smartest person in a room, leave that room.
Leave that room.
And for reference, he was saying this in response to Terence Howard name dropping him on Joe Rogan podcast because he gave Terence Howard a critical evaluation of the rubbish Terence Howard wrote and sent to him. But Terence's ego couldn't take it, so he was like, "Oh, this man bashed me." No, he just gave you a peer review. But yeah,
Yeah.
so if you find yourself in a room and you're the smartest person there, change the room.
Yeah.
And please, just touching on that point, take correction. Take correction. Correction hurts. Criticism
Yeah.
hurts.
Criticism
Not all
hurts.
of not constructive criticism. Criticism that builds up. Criticism that points out the things you did wrong and the ways that you could have gotten it right. It's not criticism that just pulls you down for the sake of pulling you down. But take it. It will pain you, but take it, acknowledge it,
Yeah.
and then walk with it. Please, enjoy.
Yeah. And on that point, as I round off everything that we're saying, I just want to mention one thing. If you want to test how fragile your male ego is and kind of work on it, I think the best way to test it is actually to ask your partner, your sexual partner, to give you feedback on your bedroom skills. That's the most
Well,
that's
that is
easy.
for those that have sexual partners.
Yeah.
Some of us are trying to be priests. We are trying to serve the Lord
And it
for
doesn't
the
have
rest
to
of
be
our life.
sexual partner, but it just needs some. It needs to be someone who is in your life who has seen you,
You
through thick
yeah.
and thin, and then is able to
Some
give
of
an
us want to be Catholic priests.
And
So
objective
please,
the
feedback.
way you react to
Catholic
that,
priests will only they don't see you through thick and thin.
they don't see you through the see the way you react to that,
Will
the
inform,
way you
yeah.
handle it, will tell you just how bad it is and how much work you need to do. There's a point, like how you are feeling for the next 5 days after it. You you will know that okay, I have
Yeah.
work to do, and you can start working from there. I think that's a very
All
important
right.
tip. All right, but anyway, thank you for joining us on this episode of the podcast, TikTok podcast, and as usual, Innocent gave us some wonderful words. Tumwa gave us wonderful words as well, and a lot of things that we need to like think on and everything. But anyway, thank you for joining us. Hope this has been informative for you. Take care. See you on the next episode. Ciao.
Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, and
Like,
comment.
share,
Like,
subscribe,
share,
Joe.
yes,
Thanks,
yes,
God
yes,
bless. Feed
and
our main
comments. Those
egos.
comments,
Yes, we need
those
it.
comments matter.
If not,
Those
all we have is
comments
waffles.
matter. Yeah, please. Those comments
Yes,
matter. We like
comment,
to get
Joe.
feedback. Comment and let
All
us
right.
know what you think. All right. Safe.
Bye.
Feedback. Tell us what to talk about also. Eshe.
Yeah.